Today we're venturing into one of the Wild West's most controversial stories, Wyatt Earp's Vendetta ride. If you've ever wondered how a respected lawman could cross the line into personal revenge, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Buckle up as we dive into a ruthless chapter of frontier justice, complete with fierce cowboys, complex loyalties, and the unstoppable drive for payback. Number 1. Tensions in an untamed town. Tombstone drew people from across the country looking for quick wealth, and its dusty streets reflected the chaos of any boomtown in the American Old West. Merchants jostled for business alongside saloon owners and drifters who arrived with little more than a saddle and a dream. Conflicts came as no surprise. A wave of speculators fueled a silver rush, ranchers worried about cattle rustling, and itinerant cowboys tested the limits of local ordinances. Wyatt Earp initially appeared like a firm answer to the region's lawlessness, but his badge brought complications. He had moved through various frontier towns before settling in Tombstone, often finding side work in far from respectable establishments such as gambling halls. This dual role, sometimes lawman, sometimes entrepreneur, created suspicion. Townspeople wondered whether he really wanted to protect their interests or merely shield his own. Despite those misgivings, he presented himself as someone who could curb the worst impulses of local ruffians. It also helped that his brother Virgil secured an official law enforcement position, giving the Earp family a stronger foothold. But corruption flowed both ways in Cochise County. The local sheriff, John Bean, was not immune to side deals or political favors, and he had motives that often went against Wyatt's. In that environment, every dispute felt like a match tossed into dry brush. Adding to the tension, the so-called cowboy faction, men like Ike Clanton and his associates, resented heavy-handed interference. They led a lifestyle that blurred legal lines. Sometimes they herded cattle legitimately. Sometimes they drifted into outlaw territory, driving stolen livestock across the Mexican border for quick cash. Newspapers, the era's main source of mass communication, turned rumors into sensational headlines. Different articles implied that the Earp family was in bed with local business owners, clamping down on competition under the guise of law and order. Others suggested the cowboys were the real threat, accusing them of robbing stagecoaches and terrifying travelers. This swirling mix of allegations stirred up personal grudges, leaving neutral townsfolk to watch in unease, wary of stepping into the crossfire. What started as minor run-ins soon escalated. The lines between lawmen and outlaws blurred, especially when the people tasked with upholding justice also had financial ties in gambling and property. Far from simply cowboy versus lawman, it became a complex drama in a community where many carried firearms and believed in settling scores personally. That atmosphere set the stage for a vendetta that would test how far a man with a badge could go when he felt the legal system no longer served him. While some saw Wyatt Earp as the only figure brave enough to tame the Wild West environment of Tombstone, others viewed his approach as dangerously close to vigilantism. The uneasy balance lingered, and every step Wyatt took seemed to push him deeper into a quagmire of frontier politics, personal grudges, and the relentless code of retribution. Number 2. The spiral into personal warfare. Wyatt Earp's personal relationships influenced how events played out. His friendship with Doc Holliday, for instance, was more than a random alliance. Doc, a gambler and a known gunslinger, carried a reputation for getting into deadly scrapes. Their bond meant Wyatt had a fiercely loyal ally, but this also intensified community fears. People wondered if Wyatt himself was a magnet for dangerous company. Local power brokers saw Wyatt's inner circle as too quick to resort to violence, especially when confronted with perceived threats. On the other side, the Clantons maintained alliances among ranchers, saloon owners, and traveling cowboys who found strict gun control measures insulting. This faction resented how frequently the Earps seemed to brand them outlaws, especially since frontier life often required bending or breaking laws just to survive. A significant debate revolved around carrying weapons in town. While some believed in restricting firearms on city streets, the cowboy faction saw that as an affront to their personal freedom. Suspicion built on both ends. The Earps claimed that Ike Clanton and his associates ran organized theft rings. The cowboys accused the Earp family of profiting from selective enforcement, sparing their friends while targeting rivals. None of this, however, came close to the bitter animosity unleashed when Morgan Earp was shot and Virgil Earp was severely injured. These attacks marked a turning point. Local authorities seemed unable or unwilling to solve these crimes. Wyatt felt that Johnny B and the sheriff sided more with the cowboys, either out of loyalty or personal grudges. When official investigation stalled, Wyatt's sense of betrayal grew. Talk of vengeance circulated in hushed tones at back tables and saloons, or in the grim faces of Wyatt's supporters. Frontier justice, it seemed, demanded a reckoning that formal law couldn't provide. The line between lawful duty and personal vendetta vanished almost overnight. Wyatt formed a small posse, which included Doc Holliday, his brother Warren, and a few other men who had no problem riding out to hunt suspects. Some local ranchers discreetly provided horses or directions, believing Wyatt's group might rid the area of men who threatened the county's fragile stability. Others felt these so-called lawmen were crossing a dangerous threshold, turning into their own brand of outlaws. People gossiped that those targeted by Wyatt's posse rarely made it to any jail or courtroom. Meanwhile, newspapers picked up the story, describing Wyatt Earp as a relentless avenger who had gone beyond normal law enforcement. Articles penned by rival publications even claimed that Wyatt's vendetta was a cover for personal grudges stretching back to old financial disputes. Within a few weeks, Tombstone became ground zero for discussions about how far a lawman could push the boundaries before becoming the very thing he swore to fight. The vendetta spread beyond the immediate circle of the Clantons, as fear made suspects scatter across the region. Wyatt's name became a warning sign, whispered in camps and saloons miles away from Cochise County. Some welcomed the shakeup, hoping it would scare off criminals who preyed on travelers. Others saw it as an ominous step toward outright vigilantism. With each confrontation, Wyatt's reputation evolved. No longer just the man who policed rowdy drunks and gamblers, he became something else. An imposing figure delivering final justice on deserted trails, armed with the sure knowledge that no local judge would question him as long as he rode with his supporters. Each act cemented his legend while chipping away at any claim that he was unbiased. In that swirl of conflicting loyalties, the vendetta took on a life of its own, marked by ambushes, shootouts, and narrow escapes. Number 3. Escalation beyond the badge. One striking aspect was the geographical scale. Wyatt's posse traversed rugged mesas and sun-baked deserts, sometimes riding near the Mexican border. That region harbored cattle smugglers and outlaw hideouts, so navigating it required both caution and nerve. In some areas, residents were more worried about Apache raids or opportunistic bandits than they were about Tombstone's politics. Yet rumors of Wyatt Earp's vendetta preceded him, so entire ranches closed their doors to travelers, unsure who might show up demanding information or supplies. The southwestern frontier was shaped by treaties, border deals, and fragile truces with Native American communities who had reasons of their own to distrust outsiders. If Wyatt's posse pushed into tribal land without permission, they risked sparking another layer of conflict. Though few official records detail these intersections, accounts from travelers suggest that the group exercised caution whenever they approached unfamiliar territory. They often relied on local guides who could navigate canyons and mesas and possibly talk them out of confrontations. Financial backing also entered the picture. Speculation persists that certain well-to-do men in Tombstone secretly funded Wyatt's vendetta, hoping to scare away roaming gangs responsible for stagecoach robberies that disrupted commerce. By eliminating or driving out persistent troublemakers, these investors could protect the flow of goods and silver. Conversely, some wealthy ranchers who profited from less legitimate activities might have offered safe haven to the cowboy faction. This shadowy economy of bribes and under-the-table deals meant the vendetta was about more than personal revenge. It intersected with local power struggles over land, mineral rights, and trade routes. The fear factor ballooned. Bar patrons whispered stories of Wyatt arriving in a town at dusk, confronting men identified as Morgan's attackers and leaving them either dead or terrified. These tales, sometimes exaggerated, cast Wyatt as a figure who operated under his own legal code. That perception alarmed even those who had supported strict law enforcement in Tombstone. They saw the difference between stopping a crime in progress and systematically hunting down suspects without due process. The Vendetta also broke alliances that had once protected Wyatt. Some merchants who had backed him when he wore an official badge now doubted the wisdom of endorsing his personal crusade. The risk of retaliation was real: firebombed businesses, stolen livestock, or ambushes on lonely roads. Meanwhile, Johnny Bean tried to rally posses of his own to arrest Wyatt, but the support he mustered was tepid. Many men refused to confront Wyatt and Doc Holliday head-on, fearing they'd be picking a fight they could not win. Rumors claimed Bean's men would sometimes arrive hours after a shootout, only to find the fugitives gone. Each fruitless chase widened the rift in local politics. The name Wyatt Earp spread throughout the West, carried by traveling peddlers and stagecoach drivers who recounted the Vendetta's highlights. They described the tension in Tombstone, the bullet-riddled bodies found in dusty roads, and the eerie sense that the law had turned on itself. This publicity was a double-edged sword. It elevated Wyatt's reputation as a frontier enforcer while simultaneously painting him as a vigilante. Historians later discovered letters suggesting that territorial officials hesitated to act aggressively against Wyatt because a portion of the public saw him as a hero who was finally ridding the area of a long-standing outlaw menace. Whether these letters truly reflect official sentiment or just rumor is hard to confirm, but they offer a glimpse into the moral gray zone that Wyatt Earp inhabited. The Vendetta thus became a phenomenon that overshadowed other Old Western outlaws and lawmen. It spotlighted how quickly legal authority could merge with personal grudges, especially in a land where communication was slow and federal oversight practically non-existent. Number 4. The legacy of a line crossed. Within just a few months, Wyatt's Vendetta changed Tombstone from a rough mining town to a stage for one of the most notorious true crime cases in Wild West history. In the immediate aftermath, a number of the men Wyatt targeted lay dead, while others fled the territory for safer confines. With his enemies scattered, Wyatt faced his own uncertain future. Officially, he was no longer a deputy or a recognized lawman. Unofficially, he carried a fearsome legend. Some residents breathed a sigh of relief, hoping the region would stabilize without the constant threat of blood feuds. However, tensions didn't simply vanish. Survivors of the faction that Wyatt hunted down harbored resentment, fueling sporadic acts of violence in surrounding counties. In distant ranches and frontier towns, Wyatt's story took on mythic proportions. Campfire tales cast him as the final word on justice, a figure who dared to go further than the law allowed. Conversely, critics labeled him an example of what happens when personal emotion hijacks authority. The newspapers, forever hungry for sensational material, profited from both angles. They sold papers by celebrating Wyatt as the frontier hero who cleaned up the Old West and by condemning him for acting like an outlaw himself. Over time, dime novels and traveling storytellers shaped a narrative that often glossed over the scandalous details. Hollywood would later join in, polishing the rough edges and showcasing dramatic shootouts that left audiences thrilled. These commercialized versions sometimes omitted key points about bribery, unsettled land disputes, and the presence of organized criminal networks across the border. They also downplayed the fact that Wyatt was not a saintly guardian of justice, but a businessman who occasionally partnered with less savory characters. For people eager to build their brand of the American Old West, Wyatt Earp was a goldmine of contradictions. Instead of one definitive view, his reputation fractured into countless pieces. To some, he was the ultimate cowboy lawman, standing tall against chaos. To others, he was a prime example of hypocrisy, turning the law into a private war as soon as his family was threatened. Scholars who comb through court records and private letters find ample evidence for both arguments. The hearing transcripts related to the earlier Tombstone gunfights paint Wyatt as more cunning than heroic, while eyewitness accounts sometimes praise him for risking his life to protect innocent townspeople. This ongoing debate mirrors the broader question of how justice was served in places where official structures were fragile. The Vendetta underscores the darker side of a region often romanticized for its grit and freedom. Life in the Old West demanded constant vigilance, and moral lines were drawn in shifting sands. By taking matters into his own hands, Wyatt Earp showed that even recognized lawmen could be compelled or tempted, to exceed official boundaries. After leaving Arizona, Wyatt drifted around the West, eventually settling in California. He never faced serious legal consequences for the vendetta, partly because many believed his actions had rid Tombstone of a dangerous criminal element. His later years saw him dabble in gold mining, real estate, and even consulting on silent Western films. But the vendetta always remained the defining chapter of his life, casting a long shadow over every new venture he tried. Modern historians, along with countless YouTube channels and Old West history documentaries, continue to dig into the details. They uncover old letters that might clarify or muddy the narrative. Each new revelation sparks renewed interest. Some sides argue it validates Wyatt's acts of vengeance. Others point to fresh evidence of corruption that complicates his legend. Yet the central questions remain. Was Wyatt Earp justified in launching a private crusade after official channels failed? Or did he become the exact type of outlaw he once pursued? The continuing fascination with Wyatt's story lies in that tension. It holds a mirror up to any society wrestling with justice, power, and the consequences of personal revenge. The Vendetta ride stands as a powerful reminder that what unfolds under the banner of law can sometimes be indistinguishable from the raw instincts that drive an outlaw. By pushing the boundaries of authority, Wyatt Earp exposed the precarious nature of frontier justice, leaving behind a legacy that still sparks intense debate among historians, enthusiasts, and casual observers of the American Old West.